He showered me with gifts, whispered promises of forever, and flashed his millions like it was nothing. I was blinded by love until Jada walked into his office that day. What this brilliant black woman revealed about my perfect millionaire boyfriend changed everything. Here's my truth. Before we dive in, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss another story about relationships, deception, and finding your power. This story changed my life, and it might just change yours too. Before I met him, my life was painfully ordinary. I was working as an executive assistant at a marketing firm, making just enough to afford my tiny one-bedroom apartment and occasionally treat myself to takeout on Fridays. My dating life? A series of disappointing coffee dates and situationships that never quite became something real. I was that friend who was perpetually single, always the bridesmaid and never the bride. My routine was predictable. Wake up, go to work, come home, scroll through social media, sleep, repeat. I wasn't unhappy exactly, just waiting for something or someone to make life extraordinary. That someone walked into my life on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was rushing to a client meeting, balancing my laptop bag, umbrella, and a tray of coffees when I collided with him outside the high-rise where he owned the top 3 floors. Coffee splashed all over his custom Italian suit, and I nearly died of embarrassment on the spot. But instead of anger, he laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I needed an excuse to change anyway, he said, helping me gather my scattered belongings. Let me make it up to you with dinner tomorrow. That's how it started, with spilled coffee and a smile that would change my life. Our first date wasn't just dinner, it was a private chef's table at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. By the third date, he was sending his driver to pick me up with fresh flowers waiting in the back seat. Weekly gifts became my new normal. Designer handbags I couldn't pronounce, jewelry that cost more than my annual salary, surprise weekend getaways on his private jet. He remembered every detail about me, from my coffee order to childhood stories I'd mentioned once in passing. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly valued. When other women looked at us, I could feel their envy, and I won't lie. It felt good to be the one who had finally made it. 3 months in, he suggested I move into his penthouse. Why waste money on rent when I have all this space, he'd said, gesturing around his marble-filled palace in the sky. 6 months in, there was a ring on my finger, 5 carats that caught the light from every angle. My friends were equal parts thrilled and concerned at the whirlwind pace, but I shut down their worries. What did they know about real love, about seizing happiness when it appears? My social media became a highlight reel of our perfect life, exotic vacations, charity galas where I draped myself in couture, cozy but immaculately staged moments in our designer home. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. He was the successful, generous, handsome millionaire, and I was the lucky woman who'd captured his heart. My old colleagues would message me saying how they lived vicariously through my posts. Family members, who'd once worried about my single status, now asked for investment tips from my fiancé. I'd gone from ordinary to extraordinary overnight, all because this powerful man had chosen me. At night, as I lay in our king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, I'd wonder what I'd done to deserve this fairy tale. Looking back now, I realize I was asking exactly the right question, for all the wrong reasons. The shift was so gradual I barely noticed it happening, like water slowly rising around you. By the time you realize you're drowning, you're already in too deep. The first red flag appeared when I mentioned wanting to meet up with my college friends for our annual reunion weekend. His smile remained, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Why waste time with people from your past when we're building our future?" he asked, booking us a surprise couples massage for that same weekend. I felt guilty for even considering choosing my friends over him, especially after everything he'd given me. Then came the comments about my wardrobe. "Baby, you represent me now," he'd say, replacing my comfortable clothes with designer outfits he'd selected. He installed a personal stylist in our home, someone who answered to him, not me. I told myself it was sweet that he wanted me to look my best. When I mentioned missing my old job, he seemed confused. "Why would you want to work when you don't have to?" he asked. "I want to spoil you." The monthly allowance he deposited into an account he controlled was generous, but I found myself asking permission before making purchases, like a child seeking approval. My phone started ringing less. Friends stopped calling after too many cancelled plans. My sister's texts grew shorter, more formal. "He's just protective," I'd explain when they commented on his behavior. "He values our time together." But the truth was, our world had shrunk to just the two of us. Or rather, to just him, with me as an accessory to his life. He knew where I was every minute of every day, tracking my location for safety reasons. When I complained about feeling isolated, he surprised me with an exotic vacation, another beautiful cage with a spectacular view. Money became both a reward and a weapon. Large purchases appeared after arguments, as if diamonds could patch the growing distance between us. When I expressed opinions that differed from his, especially about finances or our future, he'd remind me of my life before him, the struggle to pay rent, the knockoff handbags. "I lifted you up," he'd say, not unkindly. "Don't you trust me to know what's best for us?" And I did trust him. Until the day I met Jada, I trusted him completely. I remember the exact moment Jada walked into our lives. I was bringing lunch to his office, something I'd started doing since I had all this free time now. She was standing in his conference room, commanding attention in her tailored burgundy pantsuit, pointing at projections on the wall with unwavering confidence. I hovered in the doorway, suddenly self-conscious in the outfit he'd selected for me that morning. "Ah, there she is," he said, beckoning me inside. "Sweetheart, meet Jada Williams, our new Chief Financial Officer." Her handshake was firm, her smile professional but warm. "I've heard so much about you," she said, though something in her eyes told me she was seeing beyond the curated version of me he'd likely presented. Over the following weeks, I found myself creating reasons to visit his office when I knew Jada would be there. There was something about her that fascinated me. The way she spoke directly, without the cushion of flattery everyone else used with him. How she challenged his ideas openly in meetings, yet he respected her for it. She wasn't impressed by the wealth, the power, the status that had so thoroughly blinded me. "You know, you're quite smart," she told me one afternoon when we ended up alone in the elevator. "He mentioned you used to work in marketing. Do you miss it?" No one had asked me that in months. What started as curiosity evolved into something like friendship. Coffee in his office building turned into lunch dates without him. I found myself sharing things with Jada I hadn't told anyone. Not my friends, not my family, certainly not him. How sometimes I felt more like a possession than a partner. How the golden cage was starting to feel smaller each day. How I couldn't remember the last decision I'd made entirely on my own. Jada mostly listened, asking occasional questions that made me think deeper about my situation. "Have you ever seen his complete financial records?" she asked me one day, stirring her coffee with unusual intensity. When I laughed and said those weren't exactly bedtime reading materials, her expression remained serious. "I think there are some things you should know," she said quietly. "Things I've noticed in the company accounts that don't add up, and I'm concerned, not just as the CFO, but as your friend." In that moment, looking into her steady, concerned eyes, I felt a chill run through me. It was the first time I'd considered that the fairy tale might actually be a carefully constructed illusion. I couldn't sleep that night after talking with Jada. Her words echoed in my mind, things that don't add up. Was it possible I'd been living with a stranger all this time? The next morning, while he was at the gym with his trainer, I did something I'd never done before. I went into his home office and started searching. At first, I felt like a thief in my own home, hands trembling as I sorted through documents and logged into his computer, using the password I'd seen him type countless times. What I found made my blood run cold. The wealth I'd been so dazzled by was largely smoke and mirrors, massive loans against depreciating assets, properties mortgaged to their limits, credit cards maxed out to maintain our lifestyle. The company was hemorrhaging money, kept afloat by increasingly desperate investments and creative accounting. The emergency business trips coincided perfectly with calls from creditors. Even the ring on my finger, my precious 5 carats, had a payment plan stretching years into the future. Each discovery was another crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. The most painful revelation came hidden in a folder labeled Investments, detailed dossiers on wealthy women, their net worth, inheritance situations, family connections. Some names had been crossed out with notes like insufficient assets or too strong family ties. Then I found my file, pictures from before we met, my modest savings account balance highlighted, notes about my estranged relationship with my father, my career ambitions, my insecurities, all things I'd shared in vulnerable moments. At the top, a handwritten note, excellent prospect, no family wealth but perfect public image and easily manageable. When he returned home, I was sitting in the living room surrounded by printouts of what I'd found. His face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, surprise, anger, and finally, a cold calculation that I now recognized had always been there beneath the charm. "You went through my private things," he said, somehow turning my discovery into my transgression. But something had shifted inside me. Jada's strength had awakened my own. "Was I ever anything more than a prospect to you?" I asked. His silence told me everything the documents couldn't. That night, I packed a single suitcase, just my clothes from before him, the few possessions that were truly mine. I left the designer dresses, the jewelry, the handbags. I couldn't bring myself to spend another night in the penthouse that now felt like a beautiful prison. With nowhere else to go, I called the only person who knew the full truth, Jada. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said without hesitation, no questions asked. Jada's apartment wasn't what I expected from a high-powered CFO. It was modest but warm, filled with books and art from her travels. "I choose to live below my means," she explained, setting up her guest room for me. "Financial independence gives you the freedom to walk away from any situation that doesn't serve you." That first night, over cups of tea that grew cold as we talked until dawn, Jada shared her own story. Growing up watching her mother stay in a bad marriage because she couldn't afford to leave, putting herself through business school, and climbing the corporate ladder as a black woman who refused to compromise her values for comfort. "What he did to you is financial abuse," she said plainly. "It's about power, not love. He isolated you, made you dependent, and convinced you that you were nothing without him." Her words were like keys unlocking doors I hadn't even realized were closed in my mind. "But you have something he never counted on," she added with a smile that carried both warmth and steel. "You have resilience, and now you have me." The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. He called incessantly, alternating between threats and tearful pleas. When that didn't work, he sent expensive gifts. When those were returned, he froze the accounts he controlled, leaving me truly penniless. My social media exploded with mutual friends taking sides, most assuming I'd done something to ruin a perfect relationship. I lost followers by the thousands when I stopped posting aspirational content. It felt like mourning, not just him, but the life I thought I had, the person I thought I was. Jada became my anchor through the storm. She helped me find a temporary job at her friend's marketing agency. We spent evenings at her kitchen table, where she taught me about investing, credit scores, and building wealth slowly but sustainably. "Money is just a tool," she would say. "It's meant to work for you, not control you." Under her guidance, I opened my own bank accounts, created a budget for the first time in years, and started setting aside small but consistent savings. Each independent financial decision felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But the lessons went beyond money. Jada introduced me to her circle of friends, accomplished women who valued substance over status. We had game nights and book discussions where my opinions were respected, not tolerated. Through their stories and support, I began to understand what healthy relationships, romantic or otherwise, actually looked like. Equal partnership, mutual respect, room to grow individually and together. The most powerful moment came 3 months after I'd left him. I was having dinner with Jada when she said, "You know, you never needed rescuing. Not from me, not from him. You rescued yourself the moment you chose truth over comfort." I realized she was right. Despite all his manipulation, when faced with evidence of his deception, I had found the strength to walk away. The woman who had been so easily dazzled by wealth and attention had found something more valuable: her self-worth. "My mother used to tell me something when I was growing up," Jada said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Never build your house on someone else's land. Your life, your security, your happiness. They have to be founded on ground that belongs to you." In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not just gratitude for her wisdom, but a profound recognition that I was finally ready to start building on my own land. 1 year after walking out of that penthouse, my life is unrecognizable in all the best ways. I'm living in my own apartment now. It's nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with mismatched furniture and plants that somehow haven't died yet, but every inch of it is mine. I paid the security deposit with money I earned myself. When I turn the key in the lock each evening, I feel a quiet pride that outshines any rush I ever got from stepping into his marble foyer. The marketing agency where Jada helped me get a temporary position saw something in me I had forgotten existed. 6 months in, they offered me a permanent role as a content strategist. Last month, I led my first major campaign pitch and won the client. My boss actually listened when I spoke. My ideas mattered because they were good, not because of who I was dating. The paycheck isn't huge, but it's mine. Every dollar represents my talent, my effort, my value, not someone else's approval. I've reconnected with some old friends, the ones who tried to warn me and whom I pushed away. Those reunions weren't easy. There were tears, uncomfortable silences, apologies on both sides. But authentic relationships can withstand honesty. Not everyone came back into my life, and I've learned that's okay too. Some bridges, once burned, stay ash. That lesson itself is valuable. My relationship with money has completely transformed. I have a savings account now that grows a little each month. Jada helped me set up a small investment portfolio. Nothing fancy, she said, just consistent and patient. When I buy myself something nice, it's because I've planned for it, saved for it, decided it's worth it, not because someone else is using it to control me or appease me after an argument. As for love, I'm dating again, cautiously. My type has changed dramatically. The flash and dazzle that once blinded me now sets off warning bells. I'm attracted to kindness, to genuine interest in my thoughts, to men who have their own full lives and want a partner, not a possession. I went out with a high school teacher last week who talked passionately about his students' progress and asked thoughtful questions about my work. No private jets or Michelin stars, just good conversation over moderately priced wine. I found myself laughing more naturally than I had in years. Jada and I meet for coffee every Sunday. She's become the sister I never had, the mentor I didn't know I needed. She recently started her own financial consulting firm, focusing specifically on helping women achieve economic independence. I'm designing her website pro bono. "Full circle," she said when I offered. "Sometimes we talk about him. I heard through mutual connections that his company finally collapsed under the weight of its debts. Occasionally, I feel a flicker of what might be pity but never regret. People often ask if I'm angry about what happened, if I feel those years were wasted. The truth is more complicated. Would I choose that path again, knowing what I know now? Never. But would I erase it if I could? Also number. That relationship taught me what love isn't, which helped me recognize what it is. His deception showed me how strong I actually am. And most importantly, it brought Jada into my life, a friendship that taught me more about genuine connection than any romance. The other day, I was walking home from work when I caught my reflection in a storefront window. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself, not because I looked so different physically, but because of the quiet confidence in my stance. I no longer walk like someone trying to prove her worth through association with a powerful man. I walk like a woman who knows exactly who she is, what she's overcome, and where she's going. And that journey, from his arm candy to my own person, is the real fairy tale. Not the one that begins with a handsome prince, but the one that ends with finding myself. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below sharing your own experience with financial manipulation in relationships. You're not alone. And remember, true wealth isn't in a bank account, it's in knowing your worth. See you in the next video.